I'm Guesser.
This is your host, Balor.
And I'm Tamir.
Hello. Thank you for listening to the 77 Nation podcast. We cover politics, economy, international relations, and other important topics that influence our daily lives. As your host, I am Balor, and my co-host Gisir is also present. Today we will be speaking with Dr. Marissa Smith. She's a frequent commentator on Mongolian politics, economy, and mining-related issues. She's an anthropologist by profession, and she has lived in Mongolia before, and I believe she can read and write in Mongolian too. Is that correct, Marissa?
Yes.
Nice. It's very exciting to hear you.
Yes. Well, welcome to our podcast, and thank you for joining us today. We will be discussing about the recent presidential election, voter turnout, and perhaps some policy, foreign policy, and party politics, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it sounds great. I'm very excited to be here and to discuss with both of you.
Wonderful. So there were many new elements that Mongolia has never dealt with before during, this past June 9th presidential election. For example, restricting COVID-19 guidelines, the self-evident weakening of the major opposition party, Democratic Party, and of course there was no public presidential debate. What is your overall take on all these aspects that played a major role in the presidential election?
Yeah, frankly, I kind of feel like my head is still spinning because the election period itself, the campaign period itself was so short, right? 15 days.
Yes.
To begin with, which is unusually short, right?
Has it always been like that? I mean, obviously, compared with large elections like in the US, where campaign could take more than a year. Obviously, they have to cover a lot of different regions and reach as many voters as possible. But I feel like this has been a challenge that many opposition representatives have always indicated as an issue, because lesser known candidates don't stand a chance against major parties and major candidates. Polar, has it always been about 2 weeks?
I believe that's the presidential election law, yeah.
Okay, so I feel like I looked it up and it was actually shorter than usual, but right. Yeah, and then kind of I was watching, for weeks ahead of time, like what sort of special measures might be put in place due to COVID, and I didn't see a lot about that. One thing that was different, of course, due to COVID as well, was election observers, the election observation. I think there were some irregularities there, also with international observers coming in. Of course, the OSCE team did come, but it was smaller than usual, was my understanding. And then, of course, right, I'm watching the campaigns kind of on Twitter, or the internet at least. There was relatively a lot of information about Hurlsuk's campaign and Inkbot also. But then, yeah, Inkbot suddenly got the last few days of the campaign, unfortunately tested positive for COVID and then was hospitalized. And then right there, yeah, like at the last minute, there was this scramble to try and organize a debate. And after MNB there was no official debate, right? So yeah, yes. that was very surprising to me, and I saw a really strong response, from Mongolians on social media and whatnot, that was a big issue that there was not this final campaign event, right?
Yes, personally, for me, the biggest issue with it is, could it perhaps set a precedent for the future debates when similar to the situation in Russia, where whenever recently there were presidential elections, President Putin wouldn't wouldn't be present at those debates, citing his business and difficulty scheduling, stuff like that. So, I mean, I understand that this time it was unfortunate with unforeseen circumstances, but hopefully this doesn't set a precedent for the future debates.
Right. Well, yeah, and just there was never any statement made from Hurlsuk, correct, or from the MPP about there not being a debate. Was that correct?
If I remember it correctly, the spokesperson said something like it was Enkbat's fault that it's impossible to do a virtual debate that could be as constructive enough as in-person debates. So if I remember it correctly, it was something like that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, no. So I still feel like it's all kind of and yeah, really, really head spinning.
What is your take on the Democratic Party and its weakening of it? I feel like this presidential election really, it was basically like self-evident that the party is no longer together.
Well, it seems like, well, they've been kind of in this state for, I think now, since at least, right, the parliamentary elections, right? There's been this struggle over who's the chair and
since the 2016 parliamentary
no,
election.
The 2020.
I'm not sure. 2020, yeah, there was like the 2020 parliamentary election.
I think
right?
it began before.
It definitely did begin before, but
yeah.
I'm not really clear like what the dispute was, but there was already this dispute between the current sort of two factions happening after the 2020 parliamentary elections, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think so.
And was not really clear what the dispute was about, but then obviously it became very, very clear, when they had the party chairmanship elections that were disputed, and there were actually like two separate elections, right? There was like a paper ballot and like an electronic one that then it was claimed that was like, I don't know if necessarily hacked, but some sort of something like that happened, right? And now there's this matter of like the seal and who has the seal. Anyway, so I mean, to me, it seems like this has been going on for so long that there's still a party, there's still people, there's still resources, right?
Yeah.
That are being fought over. So sort of the question is, how long is that going to go on? There seems to be something there that's being contested over, and the question is who's going to gain control of it. That seems to be what's happening.
Follow-up question to that. Do you think Mongolia's opposition, obviously they have a future, but when do you think they'll be able to rebound?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't. I'm curious. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about this matter of what is considered like the political in Mongolia, like what are parties, because there are various groups who have sometimes run as parties, but don't usually, for the most part, even characterize themselves as a party. Like they register themselves as a party to run in elections, but the rest of the time they're actually characterizing themselves as like not parties, right?
Yes.
As electorates, right? Which is, calling yourself the electorate is an anti-party. It's saying I'm an anti-politician, right? I am the people. Or there were some third-party groups calling themselves like Zuvlul, like a council or a union or something. A council, I guess. So yeah, like what is considered political action? Yeah, I don't know.
When you say electorate, for example, last year, the current Hunnam, participated in the elections as an electorate, right? Like Zohung electorate Ifsil is
Yeah.
like the
Union or
combination
something.
union of the three or something. Would that
Yeah.
be an example of an electorate that you mentioned?
Well, I was just explaining to someone the other day, the distinction between Hun. Someone was saying like, oh well, shouldn't this be translated as National Labor Party? And I was explaining to them that there is a National Labor Party, but then there's also this union that is, Zuhun electorate.
Yeah, Ifsil,
And
right? Yes.
and then I was explaining to them, what is this Hun acronym and why that would be being used in both senses, and that there is overlap. But that's when it kind of dawned on me. I'm like, wait, electorate, like you calling yourself the electorate is almost as like kind of it's a very it's like a structural opposition to the elected politicians. I mean,
it just made me think that maybe they didn't put much thought into naming themselves like that. Maybe it's on purpose. I'm not sure.
yeah, previously I had just sort of thought, it's got some other meaning of like people who will be elected or something. But in any case, yeah, like there are all of these different terms these different groups are using that are not Nam. So it's interesting.
The way I could try to explain is that maybe it's more of a union of individuals that has shared values, and
Which is a definition of a party.
well, yes, instead of going into politics as an individual, they're sending one of the representatives to be a politician. So at some point, if these parties or unions to be matured up, they need to change their what their goals are. So I can imagine like different processes, right? Let's say three of us would start a union, and Gisela and I would decide to send you for office, and then we'll have to change the rules and principles of what the union, the electorate is, and what's the goal of it. So what I'm thinking is maybe that's their goal, but I'm not sure. But going back to the Democratic Party question, Gisela, do you have any opinion on that? Like, was the voter turnout, was any of these points surprised you at all?
I think to give credit to the candidate Hurusu, he's been popular for a long time. Even setting an example of a prime minister who was able to stand his ground, because before him the usual lifespan of a prime minister was very short, and that signified the vulnerability of the prime minister's office. But obviously him being able to keep that and becoming a candidate from the major majority party and being elected is no surprise. I think the another question was whether was it I'm not sure if ethical is the right word when he gave up his prime minister's seat, saying that he was not able to lead the country, and then coming back as someone who's a solution maker. I mean, so that was I can't deny his popularity within the population and of the party, but I think with that all being said, I was not as surprised with the election results.
Actually, while we're talking about his popularity, there was a research done by MEC that came out last week, and they ranked like government officials. So President Batulga, the outgoing president, is still ranked highest. I think he ranked like 2007, and lowest was 2008. He was ranked as 5.2, so he left at 7. And for the prime ministers were Hurusu, is also very highly ranked. Even before his resignation, he ranked 7.7. Current prime minister is actually going down from 6.3 to 5.6. So I actually agree with you on Hurusu being so popular. And one thing that I've noticed about the election and how foreign observers were looking at Hurusuk, as an individual, is that I feel like they missed the fact that the Mongolian constituencies have this pattern of choosing who the president's going to be. But if you were to look at Hurusuk and Batoga, right, they share a lot of similar values and things that are really important to the people, and they basically got selected from the same people. I don't want to say Democrat, Republican, the Democrats, or the MPP or NLP, but I feel like when it comes to president, the people chose the same type of people. Anyway, I thought I should just throw the ranking research that was done last week.
Yes.
Interesting.
So, so this sets our country under a one-party domination, right? So, Marissa, what do you think are the pros and cons of such domination in Mongolia?
Well, I think for the other foreign observers who actually I think kind of know something about the MPP and haven't just been sort of ignoring it and engaging with the DP or Hun, the sort of consensus is that there are factions in the MPP, and it is got a very well functioning internal structure and things like that. So this doesn't mean that there's like a monolithic power in charge, right? But yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting, or it's the thing to watch, I guess, is what is the momentum has been to change the balance of power between the president and the parliament, right, with the new constitutional amendments. So why does Hurlsuk want to be president? Why does the MPP want to have the presidency? Right? It's a little bit puzzling. And then why this whole thing at the end of January where there's this stepping down of Hurlsuk? What's going on there? So is he going to be more of like sort of a figurehead? Is he going to be doing particular things, or are we going to see another, several years of power struggle really between the executive and the legislative branches?
Yes.
And then, yeah, I also just don't, I feel very kind of unaware of what the other kind of wings of the MPP might be that might be sort of in parliament, or, I don't know very much about that. But I think if people are going to say there are factions and such, we need to be a little bit more, know a little bit more about that, I guess. But then on the other hand, it's a little bit difficult sometimes to see those things. So I don't know.
Yeah. As you noted, the new constitutional amendments significantly limited the role of the president in Mongolia, right? However, some are speculating that the increased involvement of the National Security Council in the decision-making is negatively affecting the separation of powers and not letting the parliament operate independently. And I was just wondering, because up until Hurlsuk became the president, he was still the leader of the party, which is traditionally a prime minister should be doing, because otherwise the prime minister can't truly be the head of the executive branch. So do you think National Security Council, I mean, its role recently has been more active and involved, maybe because of the timing and the COVID, but do you think in the future they will, negatively affect the parliament?
I mean, I've heard people saying that the NSO still does have power to do things that maybe they shouldn't, and it's three people, right? It's the president, the prime minister and the speaker, right?
Yeah, yes.
So right now, Zondenchatter, right?
Yes.
So I think also people are saying, in any case, this is an unbalanced body, even before. So is it that the NSO they can declare like a state of emergency? I can't remember exactly what their powers are.
For example, if I remember correctly, it would be that per NSC's suggestion, they could recommend people in the judicial system or in the prosecutors and recommend them for a withdrawal to the parliament. I mean, if it's accepted, they could, make people resign. So
Okay.
this by itself significantly undermines judicial branch, which is, which again threatens the separation of powers. But I at some point I heard that it was somehow also changed during the constitutional amendments to the good side. But again, NSC is still heavily influencing the work of the parliament. Am I correct, Waller? There,
I think before we get to what the role of the National Security Council is, first we have to define what does it do and what its role. So the National Security Council is under the president's office, okay? And it has three heads, as Marissa said, the president, the prime minister, and the speaker of the house. When any of these bodies suggest something, the parliament doesn't have to approve it. So unless the parliament approves it, I don't see any problem of suggesting. It's similar with any councils, right? You have members of different councils have a meeting and you write a suggestion to certain issues. So unless the parliament approves it, why is that an issue?
I have a point on that.
Okay. And the anyway, I lost train of my thought, but
sorry.
That's very helpful.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that remember at some point they were talking about Hangul. When they whoever they didn't like, politically they could, put them in different positions and could perhaps send them to jail. One of the concerns with NSC was that because they have a grip over the judicial branch, whoever's opposing them in the parliament, they could threaten them with different things. And that system by itself was called Hangul. To English
you mean like audience. Control? Like just
it's like
oversight?
Control. Yes, like hidden control over the parliament members or whoever's in politics, and make them do stuff that they want. So because they have the grip over the judicial system, judicial branch.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think among foreign observers, the consensus is that the judicial, there are so many problems with balance of power, at least, sorry to sort of put it in an American, too American of a frame maybe, but, the balance of checks and balances between the three branches is so unbalanced. Like there are so many ways that the judiciary is not independent, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You know what I blame it on?
No.
A small population. A small population. It's only 3.3 million people. Everybody knows each other. Everybody knows who works where. And
sorry, I'm not sure why am I interrupting you.
I know. What's your problem? Do you have a problem with me?
No, it's just I just want to say that I won't do this. I won't do that after this one, but I just want to mention, I think they bring example of one of the pre-Baltic countries, either Lithuania or Latvia, that has about the same number of population as Mongolia, that has, the level of development since the USSR collapse is very different. Although, the population-wise and people knowing each other is is the same thing, but they were able to deal with such hurdles much efficiently.
That's a question for an anthropologist like Marissa. Why do societies do what they do?
Well, I think one thing that's also interesting about Mongolia is like there are so many. There's like a despite it being few people, et cetera. Like you see a proliferation of agencies and bodies, right? So right, the new constitutional amendment about, or maybe there was two separate amendments, I don't remember right now, but right, there's this judicial councils, right? There's the General Judicial Council, and then there was like another one. But yeah, like there's, okay, let's have two separate new councils of judges, and one of them can discipline and dismiss judges, and the other one is in charge of appointing them. And anyway, so yeah, so this proliferation of councils, and you see that with different oversight agencies around, auditing and corruption investigations, right? So there's a trend almost to setting up new bodies that then we have to ask, like, are they competing with each other? Are they trying to kind of are they just going to be necessarily kind of having an issue over like who has scope over what, yeah.
For example, while researching you, I found out that you studied Russian, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would assume you're familiar with history of not only Russia but USSR.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think makes the political system in Mongolia different from countries of the former Soviet camp?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it is this, maybe something about this multiplicity and multilateralism might be a word for it. Yeah, I mean, clearly it is different, but I don't know that I can kind of put my finger neatly on one one thing.
For example, when I was the system for the parliamentary system, first of all, is something that Mongolia has been proud for, even today, because being sandwiched between major superpowers like Russian Federation and China, we're still able to fight for our own way of doing things. Although you would assume that you wouldn't have much say, but I think centuries long, neighborhood and somehow navigating diplomatically effectively, obviously losing some grounds in the past. The fact that we are here today being able to speak our minds, I think it's a great thing. And that's exactly why we always feared that this type of democracy would be under threat. So also, staying on the topic of the one-party domination, I wanted to ask if the current prime minister, who was recently elected as the party leader, he was, I think people are under the impression that he was always this like younger brother to Hurulsuk. So do you think at some point in the future, if they'll have a hypothetical disagreement, do you think as prime minister he'll be able to stand strong against the newly elected president?
I guess I would say that up to now I haven't really observed any sign of any differences, really. There seems to have been like a very strict division of labor. Although of course I didn't see Hurlsuk. I saw like one interview that Hurlsuk gave. between January and the start of the campaign. So it's not like he was really kind of out there saying things, but yeah, I mean, from what I've seen Oyun speaking about and doing, it's mostly, related to COVID and COVID response, and then announcing these kind of like new mega projects. So it seems like he's acting as kind of part of some kind of agreed MPP plan, right? And of course, he's associated with this like Vision 2050, these plans. So I don't see there being any big upset. But yeah, again, I really don't understand why Hurlsuk wants to be president and what he's going to do with that, unless it's just, the plan is to kind of continue this sort of coordinated MPP administration. I don't know. So I would say too soon to say, maybe.
It's interesting that you're saying that, it's why would Hurlsuk want to be a president. I also personally questioned the role of a president in Mongolia, where the executive branch head is the prime minister. And, according to the constitution, it supposedly has to be a very symbolic role with that unifies the people of the country. But, at the same time, there are some responsibilities, like being the head of the army and doing some presidential appointments, and obviously being the face and on the international level, whatever meetings of the heads of the states, there's not a prime minister, but a president from Mongolia.
Right. And I mean, Buller probably has some things to say on this level too, but like, I don't see Hurlsuk presenting himself yet internationally, right, in the ways that Elbigdorj or Enkbayer did, right? Certainly.
Yes.
Or maybe Oturbat, although I was, not, I was like, 10 years old or whatever. But so I can't really say I've observed that personally, but I don't. I mean, I know Oturbat talked to Bush and wanted to get set up some sort of strategic partnerships and stuff. So, but anyway, yeah, like I'm having a hard time seeing Hurlsuk doing these speeches at the UN, and
he's so mysterious.
Yeah,
actually, Hurlsuk he was at the UN a couple of years ago, and he gave speech in English, and which caught, people were mocking him with his English capabilities and stuff. But as president, Hurlsuk, I think in terms of foreign policy and international arena, unless he initiates something new, I think this is more of a continuing Mongolia's, grand foreign policy strategies. I don't see anything new that he's gonna come up with. But if he does, he has the parliament and he has the cabinet, so I don't see any challenge unless they think it has something to do with, national security or something major, which I don't think Hurlsuk would be doing any damage to, its own national security. But while we're talking about election and foreign policy, I wanted to ask you, what do you think of the outgoing president Batulga's strong and weak points in his foreign policy approaches in his, past 4 years? Even though he served as one-term president, I did a research on all the presidents, and it's only Batulga and Inkbayer are the single-served president. Everybody else served twice, but it looks like Hurlsuk will be serving 6 years only too.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, Batulga just is he's very skillful at, having an image, right? At like, having a brand and not that it appeals to everyone, right? but immediately, you can show someone a photograph of him who doesn't know anything about Mongolia, and they're like, oh wait, I think I did hear about, Batulga, or I heard about this like wrestler president, of Mongolia or whatever. And so, there's, but even kind of beyond that, right? Like if you look at the slogans, the political slogans now, like it all has to have like Mongol Chadna, right? Or it's
Yeah, yeah.
he can use language in a way, it's so yeah, again, like Hurlsuk, he's I don't know what kind of international image he's going to present, and Elbig Dorj, certainly he also had a way of kind of presenting himself internationally that is kind of resonates, right? But I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I've ever even like seen Hurlsuk wearing a Dell until the inauguration. Not that that's the only way to present yourself internationally as a Mongolian president, but yeah, I don't know. I don't have a super coherent answer, except just, yeah, like I just don't see like the kind of internationally facing brand of Hurlsuk kind of congealing.
Did you notice President Hurlsuk's similarities in PR efforts to the president of Russia? The comparison of photos?
Hurlsuk's, oh, well, no, and I was also just thinking that, there had just been this, high-level visit where the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Batsitsig, went to Moscow like the first week of June.
She did, yes.
And when she came back, there was press about that, oh, we were talking about a pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, so no, tell me, I hadn't sort of searched like the Russian language news or anything to see what they had said. Or
speaking of the foreign minister, I was actually very impressed with her Russian capabilities when she did an interview on Russian television. It was something that I haven't seen in a while. And I was talking about a photo comparison where, President Putin's PR team is very effective to make him look patriotic, courageous, the best person they can be.
Yeah.
And there was a comparison of photos of President Hurlsuk, which is identical, like in
yes, of course. And then there was that picture of him everyone was mocking with the memes of like, pulling the tractor or whatever it was, right?
Yeah, like being naked.
With his shirt off.
On the horse and stuff like that. Do you think it's safe to assume that he's an admirer? I'm just speculating here, but
yeah, I'm looking at the picture right now where he's literally like riding the horse around with his shirt off. I don't know.
Do people like it?
I didn't see anyone who liked it. Like I saw everyone making fun of it, whereas whenever there's like a Batulga, like, I don't know, I feel like I see, and Batulga never just like blankly copies, Putin's photos, it's not like a, one-to-one, but I mean, I don't think that from that we can say that like Hurlsuk is like an admirer of Putin or something.
Kisira, I have a question for you.
Yes.
And because you asked this question, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Okay.
Okay.
It's normal for Mongolian guys to ride a horse naked, not naked, but top naked.
So
what's wrong with it?
Out of 10 pictures.
I'll show you the. I'll send you the picture later, Buller. It's like
no.
What about the other 9? Yeah. Because, not only the pictures, but the act of not attending the debate was a very concerning one to me.
Yes. So speaking of that, Marissa, were you in the club rooms at all that evening?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, so so then you probably noticed that I had to wait like 10 minutes to log on because nobody would leave. I had to wait, but there was another room with MPP members.
Oh.
And I mean, which is fine, which is fine. They can create whatever room they want. But Hurlsuk wasn't there. I was hoping, maybe he was there, but I think that would create a even bigger issue. If you're joining MPP members and supporters, then why wouldn't you join the other clubhouse room where the two of the candidates were basically ready to debate? But that was while we're talking about clubhouse and debate, I wanted to specifically say this, and that because the national television did not host the presidential debate, the independent medias have gotten together to fact check. And the list of independent journalists and organizations are factcheck.mn, gogo.mn, icon.mn, time.mn, ubi.life. So, as part of our, 77 Nation team, we would like to recognize their independent work and at least trying to, fact check and organize some sort of a debate or communication between who's running. Because honestly, without knowing what's their policy, what's their approach, how can you really choose? And this is where democratic power discussion comes in. If the people have the power but they don't have the opportunity to question things, then where's the power? Do you know what I mean? And I was really miffed about not having to have presidential debate.
Yeah, well, I mean, and there just seems to be a pattern recently of kind of the government's organizations in Mongolia and entities in power not, there's all this talk about, digital Mongolia and e-Mongolia, but it's it seems like a very unidirectional flow of information to me. And also just withholding of information. And not just between from Mongolia to foreigners, but just in general, so yeah.
Speaking of which, where in comparison to previous presidential elections, it seemed that voter turnout this year was all-time low. Let's say half of the reason is because of COVID restrictions, but this year's was low as 59. What do you think the main reasons are, and why do you think the voter turnouts are continuing to drop in Mongolia?
I mean, I haven't looked at the numbers maybe as much as I would like to kind of try to come to some more solid hypotheses, but it does seem that there was, to some degree, like people who would have voted for Democratic Party withholding their votes until whatever is going to shake out shakes out. I don't know that would be a significant enough number to really have moved the needle at all. I mean, it was really interesting, right, to see so many people vote for Ankpat. I didn't necessarily expect that. I thought there might be more, blank votes, or, I mean, actually too, right? There's this law that, like, according to the law, if the turnout is less than 50%, right, then
Yes.
the elections can be determined invalid. So I was wondering if that was going to happen, actually. So, which it did not, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems to be a combination of younger population, like less. Maybe it just seemed that the turnout with this election kind of seemed obvious, right? I mean, it's a huge contrast with 2017, right, where there was like a runoff, and or there was the second round of elections, and so I don't know that we can say that there's like a sort of trend emerging that's directly related to, like, changing demographics in Mongolia or something like that.
What I heard a lot from my peers was that there was no competition this time.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't support MPP, they recognized that the popularity of Hurusu. So they simply were not interested because they said their vote wouldn't matter. So, I mean, I tried to discourage as much such behavior because, every vote matters. But, that was something that I've heard multiple times from my peers. Inkbot, yes, he as at least on the social media, he was gaining some traction, but you know, social media is not the reality, and reality is not social media.
Oh, right. But I mean,
I agree. Thank you.
but
for
he
saying
got
that.
like 20%. He got like 20% of the vote in, Orkhanimag. People in Erdenet, people I know in Erdenet who are not, who are like in their like, 50s and 60s, who are not definitely, not on Twitter, like,
Yeah.
they were turning their Facebook into, supporting Inkbat. So I don't know, there was like something, yeah, like people I know very well in Erdenet were suddenly supporting Inkbot, I don't know, but again, I think it was, and I mean, one of them I talked to, it was kind of like, oh yeah, well, obviously he wasn't going to win, but I want to show support for a change, and I have similar values, right?
I think this is the trend that I also saw last year when from Erdenet there were 3 elected members from Erdenet were all from 3 different parties.
Yes, yeah.
Right? And people are saying that, it could be an interesting example as society becomes wealthier, because Erdenet is, fairly middle class population. As society develops and then becomes a bit more wealthy, they tend to make more informed decisions, or sway away from populistic ideas. I mean, it's just an assumption at this point, but it was also interesting to hear from you saying that about this presidential election as well, because I was born and raised in Erdenet. I also saw that you did your dissertation on relations of international friendship in Erdenet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to read it yet, but as someone for whom Erdenet is not an indifferent topic, I was curious if what do you think of the future of the place? Once the EMC exhausts, what do you think we should expect?
Yeah, I it's not going to just exhaust, but I guess be my maybe sort of just simple statement, I guess, response to that, although I understand the kind of narrative weight of that, and so maybe I wouldn't reject the kind of narrative out of hand, but I guess I would emphasize that Erdenet it's an entire complex, right? It's an entire infrastructural hub.
Yes.
It's not just Gok, and Gok is not just a mine. Would maybe be the short answer.
Yes. How did you like Erdenet?
I love it there.
Yeah.
Marissa, how'd you like Ulaanbaatar? I'm from UB.
I also love Erdenet.
Yeah, you didn't like UB, right?
No, I also
loved UB. She loved UB.
I also love UB.
Okay.
Banzerk, yeah.
Banzerk, okay.
Actually, we should speak Mongolian.
Why chi?
Та монголоор хэлдэг.
But she's бид нараа нэг насныхан магадгүй.
Okay, ингэсэн байхгүй юу? All right, I'm going to start speaking Mongolian, okay? So, no, actually, no, because this is an English podcast and our listeners will be podcast. Okay, so the point where I was trying to get at before you guys start talking about your favorite places was that there was a number came out a couple weeks ago, right after the election, that Mongolians abroad are becoming more active in politics of Mongolia, and 21.7% voted for Hurusuk, 3 voted for Irden, and 75.4 voted for Inkbat. And not just because of these numbers, but general outlook of the recent presidential election, I came to a conclusion that most of the Mongolian populace are looking into a third party, new faces, new ideas, newer principles. I don't know, the messages that old politicians are sending no longer works for the Mongolians, at least abroad. Okay. Now, and I think this has something to do with being exposed, leaving the country and then looking back and you see it from different lens. And I wanted to get your position on why do you think that Mongolians abroad would vote for Inkpat from your anthropology perspective? You study people in society.
Yeah, I mean, I positioned himself in the way that many of them position themselves, right? As this, highly trained, well-educated, cosmopolitan kind of person, and he wasn't. And he's also kind of tapping into sort of doing things on kind of a more global scale, if that makes sense, like ed tech, and he had this thing about translating Khan Academy into Mongolian and online education and the whole mythology of the internet too, right? That it's something that connects the world. So there's that. And yeah, I mean, like the MPP, right? They position themselves as, which is also related to them being in power during COVID and everything, of course, but it is a very Mongolia centric kind of position, and a very like we're leading the country, right? If you're outside the country, how resonant is that with you, I guess, right? And I think also a lot of Mongolians living abroad, like they kind of some of the stuff that the MPP is kind of saying they're going to do, or the way that they're positioning themselves is not as plausible, or I mean, like the MPP really, like I saw they launched a new website, like they totally redesigned their website, right? Sometime between the parliamentary elections and the presidential elections, they totally revamped their website, and it's like all of these photographs of like the 20th century, right? And them again using that narrative of like, we did such a good job living, like leading the country throughout the 20th century, like reelect us, right? And if you're living in the United States or something, in an American frame, it doesn't make any like you can't really. It's surprising to Americans, I guess, that they would do that. I'm like, I understand why they're doing it, and I'm not criticizing that, but I guess I'm just saying, like, yeah, Inkbot, everything he's doing, he's positioning himself in like a very kind of globally legible way. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think one of our last questions is this: do you think with the recent political developments in Mongolia, should people be scared for the Mongolian democracy? Should people be concerned?
I guess I would say that there have been issues. There's always issues, and I think maybe this will sort of cause people to take a little bit more of a deeper critical look at governance in Mongolia, Mongolian politics than they were previously, because especially from American political scientists and such, there's been a very shallow assessment for many years, that has really overlooked some important dynamics. So I don't really expect there to be a huge change with this, but it's certainly, yeah, I think there are issues, and there have been ongoing issues, and but yeah, I'm not terrified of there being a kind of 180-degree turn, I guess. but also I'm an anthropologist, so I am like highly trained to be very skeptical of, unilinear development, sort of trend line type understandings of things. So
Fair enough.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Marissa. And unfortunately, the topic is so big, we could talk all day. Thank you so much. But you answered the last question. Mongolia's democracy is not under threat. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess just kind of the framing of, I don't know. Like I think there are definitely things to watch, and I'm really curious to see what's going to happen now with this president, parliament, judicial balance of power, I guess. And I think there are concerns about uni party, everything being under one party, that I take the point that the party is a quote unquote real party or something, and it's not a monolith, but at the same time I think there are concerns there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your time too.
Thank you.
And listeners, we will be back with new episodes sometime soon. Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.